This is an excerpt from my book in progress, Moses, 1935. Copyright 2024 by Michael Walker. Dean sat there quietly, thinking, well, why shouldn't the coloreds go to heaven? Dee was always telling her God was a God of love, yes? And why should God's love be then conditional and based upon skin tone? It seemed ridiculous to Jane. It really did. It summoned up in her small mind a bit from the book Gulliver's Travels, a book she had read and enjoyed many times since third grade. In the first section of that fantastic book, the tiny people, the Lilliputians as they were called, were fighting a war against a nearby island of similar diminutive folk, the Blefuscians? Jane couldn't remember. And the core reason, the single reason that this conflict was being waged was that the tiny combatants could not agree over the proper way to break open eggs. Should they be cracked open at the large end or the small end? The whole colored thing to Jane seemed really as ridiculous as that war. People in Moses, like her father, like T, seemed to get so worked up about the thing, as if the colors were demons out of hell or something. Jane remembered that back in March there had been some kind of big riot involving lots of coloreds in a place in New York called Harlem. She couldn't remember now what had started it. But a bunch of coloreds had seemingly gone crazy and destroyed stores there and other private property. Her father had sat glued to their radio that night, as the reports on the destruction had grown more and more dire. This is it. This is it. This is it, her father had muttered. And then he'd gone to the hall and pulled out the Winchester rifle he always used when hunting and a box of shells, frightening Jane half out of her wits. Jane, Tom, her father had whispered, I want you all to get to your rooms and lock your doors. I expect there's going to be some serious trouble in Moses tonight because of this here, he added, nodding at the radio in its non-stop hysteria. Pa, Tom said, going to their father and placing a hand on his trembling shoulder. Don't you think I should? No, son, no, their father had said, shaking his head emphatically. Get to your rooms. Lock the doors. I have got this. Tom and Jane had looked at each other. Tom had really seemed then as frightened and as small as Jane felt. So they both had done what their father commanded that night. Jane had locked the door and lain on the bed, not even bothering to get undressed, certain at some point her father would get her and tell her that they needed to leave the house, that the coloreds, just like the coloreds in faraway Harlem, were raising the town. Jane had been unable to sleep that night. She had lain on her bed and listened, her small heart thudding in her chest. as her father kept murmuring on in the parlor about how he not let the darkies take his children from him, variations of that over and over, as the radio subsided finally into blissful static, and her father finally subsided into snores and coughing. In the morning, after probably the longest night of her life, Dana unlocked her door attentively and creeped back into the shadowy parlor to find her father sleeping uncomfortably on the divan, his Winchester rifle cradled like their mother in his arms. The radio playing nothing still. The birds outside just waking up and twittering their territorial songs. Another day in Moses, Ohio.